The massive alien ship appeared over Earth without warning. It was twice the size of anything humans had ever built, with smooth curves and glowing blue lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. The ship stopped above New York City and sent a message, in perfect English. "People of Earth, we need your help." Captain Dongwu stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching the alien vessel on his screens. He was a tall man with serious eyes and short black hair. Next to him, Dr. Hana adjusted her glasses nervously as she studied the readings from their sensors. "Sir, the ship is not showing any weapons," reported Lieutenant Kim from his station. "But the energy readings are off the charts." Within hours, a smaller craft descended from the mothership. It landed in Central Park, and from it stepped three beings that looked almost human, but taller and thinner. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were large and silver. The leader wore robes that seemed to shift color in the light. The alien leader introduced himself as Velthari, ambassador of the Galactic Council. He spoke through a small device that translated his words perfectly. Behind him stood two guards with weapons that hummed with energy. "We come from a union of 12 different species," Velthari explained to the gathered human officials. "For thousands of years, we have lived in peace across the galaxy. But now, something terrible threatens us all." Dr. Hana leaned forward. She had studied alien contact protocols for years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "What kind of threat?" Velthari's large eyes grew darker. "They are called the Void Swarm. They come from another dimension, a place of endless darkness. They consume everything, planets, stars, entire solar systems. They turn all matter into more of themselves." Captain Dongwu crossed his arms. "What does this have to do with Earth?" "The swarm has already destroyed 17 worlds in our outer territories," Velthari said. "Our fleets cannot stop them. They adapt to our weapons, learn from our tactics. We are running out of options." The alien gestured to a holographic display that appeared in the air. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking destroyed worlds. The red was spreading toward the center like a disease. "We need soldiers," Velthari continued. "Your species is young and aggressive. You think differently than we do. Perhaps you can help where we have failed." Dr. Hana felt a chill run down her spine. "You want us to fight this swarm?" "We will provide weapons and ships," the ambassador said. "Your people will serve alongside our fleets. In return, we will save as many humans as possible when the swarm comes here. Because it will come here eventually." Captain Dongwu studied the alien carefully. "What kind of weapons?" Velthari nodded to one of his guards, who stepped forward with a device the size of a briefcase. When opened, it revealed a weapon that looked like a rifle, but glowed with inner light. "Energy weapons that can harm the swarm creatures," Velthari explained. "Shields that can protect your ships. Technology that will let you travel between stars quickly." The humans exchanged glances. Earth's best weapons were nuclear missiles and conventional explosives. This alien technology was beyond anything they had dreamed of. "How many soldiers do you need?" Dongwu asked. "As many as you can spare. Millions if possible. Your role will be to support our main fleets and provide numbers where we need them most." Dr. Hana frowned. "Support? What exactly do you mean?" The alien seemed uncomfortable. "Your species is inexperienced in galactic warfare, but you breed quickly and seem willing to fight. We need soldiers who can follow orders and fill gaps in our battle lines." Captain Dongwu felt something cold settle in his stomach. These aliens weren't asking for allies. They were asking for cannon fodder. "We need time to consider this," he said carefully. Velthari nodded. "Of course. But please decide quickly. The swarm moves faster each day. We estimate you have perhaps 6 months before they reach this sector of space." After the aliens returned to their ship, the human leaders gathered in an emergency meeting. Admiral Kang Min, the head of Earth's military forces, sat at the head of the table. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. "They think we're primitives," Admiral Kang Min said bluntly. "Useful, only for throwing bodies at the enemy." Dr. Hana nodded. "The way they talked about our breeding and following orders, they see us as expendable." "Maybe," Captain Dongwu said. "But they're also desperate. You don't ask for help from people you consider worthless unless you have no other choice." General Park, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for tactical brilliance, leaned back in her chair. "The question is, do we have a choice? If this swarm is real, and if it's coming here anyway, then we fight," Admiral Kangmin said simply. "But not the way they expect." Dr. Hana looked confused. "What do you mean?" The Admiral smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "They want support troops. They want us to follow their orders and use their weapons their way, but they're giving us advanced technology and 6 months to prepare." Captain Dongwu began to understand. "You want to reverse engineer their technology." "I want to improve it," the Admiral corrected. "These aliens have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. They're civilized, peaceful, predictable. But humans, we're none of those things." The meeting continued for hours. Plans were made, orders given, resources allocated. Earth's greatest minds would study the alien technology. Earth's factories would be converted to build new weapons. Earth's military would prepare for a war unlike anything in human history. 3 days later, Velthari received Earth's answer. Captain Dongwu delivered it personally aboard the alien mothership. The interior was beautiful, with flowing lines, and soft lights that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. "Earth accepts your alliance," Dongwu said formally. "We will provide military support against the Void Swarm." Velthari's relief was obvious. "Excellent. We will begin transferring weapons and technology immediately. Our military advisors will help train your forces in proper galactic combat techniques." "That won't be necessary," Dongwu replied. "We prefer to train our own people." The alien looked puzzled but nodded. "Very well. We will send supply ships with weapons and equipment. Your forces should be ready to deploy within 4 months." "They'll be ready," Dongwu promised. As the IDA human captain left the alien ship, Velthari felt a strange uneasiness. There had been something in the human's eyes, something that reminded him of predators he had seen on distant worlds. But humans were young and primitive. What harm could they do? Far below, Earth's factories were already beginning to change. In hidden laboratories, scientists were taking apart alien weapons and learning how they worked. In military bases around the world, soldiers were preparing for a war that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The aliens had asked for support. They were about to learn that humans had a very different definition of that word. Engineer Boram stood in the underground laboratory, staring at the alien energy weapons spread across her workbench. Every piece had been carefully removed and catalogued. She had been working for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. "It's beautiful," she murmured to her assistant, a young man named Tae Ho who specialized in weapons systems. Look at how they channel the energy through these crystals. Tejo nodded, but his eyes held a different kind of appreciation. It's efficient but limited. See how the power output is regulated here? They've built in safety systems that prevent overloading. Safety systems we don't need, Boram said with a grin. Above them, similar scenes were playing out in secret facilities around the world. The aliens had provided humanity with samples of their technology, expecting humans to simply copy and mass-produce them. Instead, Earth's engineers were doing something the Galactic Council had never seen before. They were making improvements. Dr. Wansik led the team studying alien shield technology in a facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. The shields were designed to absorb energy attacks and dissipate the power safely. They were perfect for defensive warfare between civilized species who fought with restraint. What if we reversed the polarity? Asked his colleague, Dr. Min Young. She was young, but brilliant, with a talent for seeing solutions others missed. Reversed? Wansik frowned. That would turn the shield into a weapon. The absorbed energy would be released all at once. Exactly. Min Young smiled. A bomb that gets stronger the more the enemy shoots at it. Across the ocean, in a converted automobile factory in Detroit, thousands of workers were building something unprecedented. The aliens had provided designs for energy weapons, expecting humans to build them exactly as specified. Instead, humans were building hybrid weapons that combined alien energy technology with human ingenuity. Supervisor Jackson watched as workers installed human-made targeting systems into alien weapon frames. The original weapons were accurate but slow to acquire targets. Human additions made them track enemies faster than anything in the Galactic Council's arsenal. "Sir," called out Worker Stevens, "we've got a problem with the power cells. The human modifications are drawing more energy than the alien batteries can provide." Jackson grinned. "Then we use human power sources, connect them to the ship's reactor directly." "But, sir, that would make the weapons incredibly powerful. Maybe too powerful." "Kid," Jackson said, lighting up a cigarette, "there's no such thing as too powerful when you're fighting for survival." Meanwhile, at the Ashanti Liaison Office in Geneva, Cormac was growing increasingly worried. The blue-skinned alien had been assigned to monitor human progress and ensure they followed proper galactic military protocols. What he was seeing made no sense. "Commander Su-Jin," he said to the human officer in charge of the liaison program, "we've received reports that your people are modifying our weapon designs. This is not advisable." Su-Jin was a woman in her 40s with cold eyes and a reputation for getting things done. She looked at the alien with barely concealed contempt. "The modifications are working perfectly, but the power levels exceed safe parameters," Cormac protested. "Your weapons are becoming too dangerous. In galactic warfare, we have agreements about acceptable force levels." "We don't have agreements with the Void Swarm," Su-Jin replied flatly. "They're not going to show restraint, so neither will we." Cormac's translator device struggled with the human concept. "But civilization requires limits, rules of engagement, proportional response." Su-Jin stepped closer, and Cormac instinctively stepped back. There was something predatory about the human's movement. "We don't do proportional," she said quietly. "We do whatever it takes to win." In space above Earth, the orbital shipyards were working around the clock. Human ships were being retrofitted with alien technology, but not in the way the Galactic Council expected. Instead of simply adding alien weapons to human ships, engineers were creating entirely new vessel designs. Captain Hyun-woo oversaw the conversion of his destroyer from Orbit Command. The ship had been renamed from USS Montana to Seoul's Hammer, and it barely resembled its original form. Where once it had carried nuclear missiles, it now bristled with hybrid energy weapons. Where it had worn steel armor, it now sported adaptive alien shielding. "Sir," reported his chief engineer, a woman named Ki Young, "the alien advisors are asking why we removed the safety interlocks from the weapon systems." Hyun-woo didn't look up from his tactical displays. "Tell them the interlocks were interfering with our targeting computers. Should I mention that we removed them because they prevented us from overloading the weapons for maximum damage?" "That's probably not necessary," Hyun-woo said, with a slight smile. The aliens had expected human ships to serve as support vessels, staying behind the main fleet and providing covering fire. Looking at the modified human ships, Ki Young doubted they would be staying behind anything. In the weapons testing facility in Nevada, Tai-ho was having the time of his life. The alien energy weapons were incredibly advanced, but they had been designed by people who thought in terms of controlled conflict. Humans, he was discovering, thought very differently. "Test 17, he called out to his team. "Modified plasma, rifle with enhanced energy flow and removed thermal limiters." The weapon fired, and the target, a thick plate of alien armor material, simply vaporized. The beam continued through 3 more plates before the automatic shutoffs engaged. "Power output is 300% above alien specifications," reported his assistant. "Excellent," Tai-ho grinned. "Now let's see what happens if we remove the automatic shutoffs." Back in space, more alien ships were arriving with supplies and equipment. The Galactic Council was rushing resources to Earth, desperate to get human forces ready for deployment. But they were beginning to notice disturbing trends in human requisitions. Admiral Velkari, a tall alien with green skin and 4 arms, reviewed the latest supply requests from Earth. The list made no sense to his orderly mind. "They're asking for 10 times the standard ammunition allotment," he told his aide. "And their power cell orders suggest they're planning to operate their weapons far above normal capacity." "Perhaps they simply want to be well prepared," suggested the aide. Velkari wasn't convinced. "They've also requested detailed technical specifications on our ship reactors and FTL drives. That information isn't necessary for support troops." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Hana was making discoveries that would have shocked the Galactic Council. The alien technology was advanced but conservative. It had been refined over thousands of years to be safe, efficient, and predictable. Humans were throwing out thousands of years of careful engineering in favor of raw effectiveness. "The alien FTL drives are amazing," she explained to a gathering of human scientists. "They can move a ship across the galaxy in days, but they're limited by safety protocols and power restrictions." "What kind of restrictions?" asked Dr. Chang-ho, who led the FTL research team. "They won't let you enter hyperspace too close to gravity wells. They automatically shut down if power fluctuations are detected. They're designed to prevent accidents." Chang-ho smiled. "What if we don't mind taking risks?" By the end of the month, human engineering teams had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had taken advanced alien technology and made it more dangerous, more powerful, and more unpredictable. The weapons hit harder, the shields absorbed more damage, and the ships moved faster than anything the Galactic Council had ever built. More importantly, humans were building these improved weapons in massive quantities. The alien suppliers were struggling to keep up with Earth's demand for raw materials and components. Commander Soo-jin received a priority message from the Galactic Council. requesting an update on human military readiness. She composed her response carefully. Human forces will be ready for deployment ahead of schedule. Our equipment exceeds all specifications. We are prepared to provide full support to Council operations against the Void Swarm. What she didn't mention was that human support would come in the form of weapons that could level cities, ships that could ram through enemy formations, and soldiers who had been trained to fight without restraint or mercy. The aliens had given humans the tools of galactic warfare. Humans had turned those tools into instruments of absolute destruction. In the depths of space, the Void Swarm continued its relentless advance toward the galaxy's core. They had faced the weapons of 12 different species and adapted to them, all. They had no way of knowing that the 13th species was about to introduce them to a completely new concept. Human warfare had no limits. The hyperspace portal opened like a wound in reality, crackling with unnatural energy. From it emerged something that made the Galactic Council fleet commanders question everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human fleet was massive. 200 ships of various sizes, all bristling with weapons that shouldn't exist. At the front flew the dreadnought Soul's Hammer, a kilometer-long monster that had been built from the hull of an old Earth battleship and enhanced with stolen alien technology. Admiral Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of Soul's Hammer, watching the alien fleet on his screens. The Galactic Council ships were beautiful things, elegant curves and flowing lines that spoke of advanced civilization. His own ships looked like what they were, weapons built by a species that had learned warfare in the mud and blood of 1,000 conflicts. "Sir," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Park, "we're receiving a transmission from the Council fleet. They want to know why we're 3 weeks early." Ji-hoon smiled grimly. "Tell them we finished our preparations ahead of schedule." What he didn't tell them was that human preparations had involved building a fleet capable of fighting the war the way humans fought wars, with overwhelming force and absolute commitment. On the Council flagship, Admiral Thilandra of the Ashanti stared at the human fleet in growing horror. The energy readings from their weapons were impossible. Her sensors showed power levels that should have torn the human ships apart. "Contact the human commander," she ordered her communications officer. "I need to speak with them immediately." The response came quickly. Admiral Ji-hoon's face appeared on her screen, and Thilandra immediately noticed something that chilled her. The human's eyes held no trace of the respect or deference she had expected from a support fleet. Instead, she saw the cold calculation of a predator. "Admiral Thilandra," Ji-hoon said politely. "We're ready to begin operations against the Void Swarm." "Admiral Ji-hoon," she replied carefully, "your fleet is larger than we expected, and your ships appear to have been significantly modified." "We made some improvements," Ji-hoon said simply. "Our engineers felt the original designs were too conservative." Thilandra felt her throat grow dry. "Conservative? Admiral, our ships represent thousands of years of refined technology. They are the pinnacle of galactic engineering." "I'm sure they are," Ji-hoon replied, "but we're not fighting a galactic opponent. We're fighting something that wants to destroy the galaxy." Before Thilandra could respond, alarms began sounding throughout her ship. Her tactical officer, a young Ashanti named Mortek, called out in panic, "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy spikes from the human fighter squadrons. They're powering up weapons that read as ship killers." Through the viewports, they could see human fighter craft moving through space. Each one was the size of an alien shuttle, but they carried weapons that belonged on destroyers. The pilots flew in tight formations that spoke of aggression and precision. Pilot Minho led Delta Squadron through a practice run near the asteroid field that marked the edge of the battle zone. His fighter, which he had named Soul's Fury, was armed with modified plasma cannons that drew power directly from his engine core. It was a design that the aliens considered suicidal. Minho considered it efficient. "Delta leader to all squadrons," he transmitted. "Remember, we're not here to play by their rules. We're here to kill everything that threatens Earth." His wingman, a woman named A. Young, flew alongside him in a fighter that had been modified with human targeting systems. "Delta leader, are you seeing these alien formations? They're flying like they're on parade." Minho looked at the alien fighter squadrons through his scope. They flew in perfect geometric patterns, maintaining safe distances and following predictable flight paths. It was beautiful and completely useless. "They've been fighting civilized wars for too long," he replied. "They've forgotten what real combat looks like." Meanwhile, on the troop transport Incheon's Wrath, Marine Colonel Yun-ji was briefing her troops for their first deployment. The soldiers were equipped with powered armor that combined human engineering with alien technology. The result was something that could take tremendous damage while dealing out even more. "Listen up," Colonel Yun-ji addressed her Marines. "The aliens expect us to follow their rules of engagement. They expect us to fight clean, take prisoners, and minimize collateral damage. Forget all of that." Sergeant Dae-sung raised his hand. "What are our actual orders, ma'am?" "Simple," Yun-ji replied. "Kill the swarm, all of it, every last piece. If it moves and it's not human or allied, you kill it. If it doesn't move but it looks like swarm, you kill it anyway." The Marines nodded grimly. They had trained for this moment, preparing for a war against an enemy that showed no mercy and asked for none in return. Back on the Council flagship, Admiral Thilandra was receiving reports that made her increasingly nervous. The human ships were not taking position in the support formations she had planned. Instead, they were moving toward the front of the fleet, arranging themselves in attack formations. "Admiral," called her tactical officer, "the human dreadnought is requesting permission to take point position for the advance to the Kepler system." Thilandra felt a chill run down her spine. The Kepler system was where the Void Swarm had been last detected. It was also where 3 Council fleets had been destroyed in the past month. "Denied," she replied quickly. "Human forces will maintain support positions behind the main battle line." The response from Admiral Ji-hoon came immediately. "With respect, Admiral, that's not how we operate." "Admiral Ji-hoon," Thilandra said firmly, "you are here to provide support to Council operations. We have thousands of years of experience fighting galactic threats. You will follow our tactical doctrine." There was a long pause before Ji-hoon responded. When he did, his voice was perfectly calm and absolutely final. "Admiral Thilandra, we didn't come here to follow anyone's doctrine. We came here to end a threat to human survival. If you want to follow us, you're welcome to. If you want to get in our way, that's your choice. But we're going to Kepler, and we're going now." Before Thilandra could respond, the human fleet began moving. Not in the orderly, coordinated advance that Council doctrine demanded, but in a rapid, aggressive surge toward the enemy position. Captain Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his destroyer, Busan's Fury, watching the alien fleet fall behind as human ships accelerated past them. His ship had been designed for Earth's oceans, but human engineers had turned it into something that could navigate the depths of space with predatory grace. "Captain," reported his weapons officer, The aliens are requesting that we slow down and maintain formation. Tell them we'll see them at Kepler, Hyunwoo replied, assuming there's anything left when we get there. Behind them, the Galactic Council fleet struggled to keep up. Their ships were faster than anything humans had originally built, but the modified human vessels were pushing their alien engines far beyond safe limits. What should have been a careful, coordinated advance had become a headlong charge toward battle. On Sol's Hammer, Admiral Ji-hoon studied the tactical displays showing the Kepler system ahead. Intelligence reports indicated a massive swarm presence, possibly the largest concentration yet encountered. The aliens planned to approach carefully, probe for weaknesses, and engage in a methodical battle that might last for weeks. Ji-hoon had different plans. "All ships," he transmitted to his fleet, "prepare for immediate combat upon arrival. No reconnaissance phase, no probing attacks. We hit them with everything we have from the moment we drop out of hyperspace." His tactical officer, Commander So Young, looked up from her station. "Sir, that's completely against Council doctrine. They'll be expecting us to survey the situation first." "The situation is simple," Ji-hoon replied. "There are enemies in that system who want to destroy humanity. We're going to destroy them first." As the human fleet approached the hyperspace jump point to Kepler, Admiral Thilandra made one last attempt to restore order to the operation. "Admiral Ji-hoon," she transmitted, "I'm ordering you to wait for the main fleet before engaging the enemy. This is a direct command from the Galactic Council." Ji-hoon's response was broadcast on an open channel, ensuring that every ship in both fleets could hear it. "Admiral, you asked for our support. You're about to get it, but understand something. Humans don't fight your wars, we fight our wars, and our wars end with the complete destruction of our enemies." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Galactic Council ships behind. In the Kepler system, the Void Swarm waited with the patience of a predator that had never known defeat. They were about to learn that there were predators in the galaxy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Kepler system looked like the inside of a nightmare, where once there had been 3 inhabited planets and a bustling mining station. Now there was only darkness and the writhing mass of the Void Swarm. The swarm ships were unlike anything in the galaxy. They weren't built. They were grown. Massive organic vessels that pulsed with dark energy, surrounded by clouds of smaller creatures that moved like schools of predatory fish. At the center of it all was something that hurt to look at directly, a structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Commander So Young stood on the bridge of Sol's Hammer as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The sight before them should have been terrifying. Instead, she felt a cold satisfaction. Finally, an enemy worth fighting. "Contact," reported the sensor operator. "Multiple swarm vessels. I count over 300 large ships and thousands of smaller ones." Admiral Ji-hoon studied the tactical display calmly. "Any sign of the mining station survivors?" "Negative. Sir, the station is gone, completely consumed." The Admiral nodded. The swarm had consumed an entire system, turning all matter into more of themselves. It was exactly what the aliens had warned about. It was also exactly what humans had prepared to face. "All ships," he commanded, "attack formation. Target the largest concentrations first. Remember, this isn't about territory or politics. This is about survival." The human fleet surged forward without hesitation. No reconnaissance, no careful probing, no attempt at communication. They had come to kill, and they began immediately. Captain Hyunwoo watched from Busan's Fury as the first wave of human ships opened fire. The modified alien weapons performed exactly as human engineers had promised. Energy beams that should have been controllable and precise instead lashed out with savage intensity, cutting through swarm creatures like burning swords. "Target acquired," reported his weapons officer. "Large swarm vessel bearing 27 Mark 4. "Fire," Hyunwoo ordered simply. The destroyer's main gun spoke with voices of destruction. The swarm ship, a twisted thing the size of a city block, simply exploded. Not damaged, not disabled, but completely destroyed in a single salvo. Around them, the rest of the human fleet was doing the same thing. Where alien weapons had been designed for surgical strikes and minimal destruction, human modifications had turned them into instruments of absolute annihilation. The swarm's response was immediate and massive. Thousands of smaller creatures launched, themselves at the human fleet, moving in coordinated swarms that had overwhelmed alien formations for months. They expected the humans to fall back and establish defensive positions, as every other species had done. Instead, the humans charged directly into them. Pilot Minho led his fighter squadron straight into the heart of a swarm cluster. His modified plasma cannons fired continuously, cutting through enemies that had never experienced such concentrated firepower. Behind him, his wingman A. Young followed a flight pattern that would have been considered insane by alien standards. "Delta Leader," she transmitted. "They're trying to surround us." "Let them," Minho replied, pulling his fighter into a turn that would have killed a pilot in an unmodified ship. More targets. The swarm creatures had adapted to alien fighter tactics over months of combat. They knew how to counter careful formations and predictable attack patterns. But human pilots didn't use careful formations. They used aggression, unpredictability, and weapons that hit far harder than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Minho's fighter screamed through a cloud of swarm organisms, his cannons firing so rapidly they began to overheat. The safety systems that alien engineers had built in would have shut down the weapons to prevent damage. Human engineers had removed those systems months ago. "Delta Squadron," he called out. "Weapons are running hot. Switch to secondary systems and keep firing." The secondary systems were human additions, missile launchers loaded with warheads that combined human nuclear technology with alien energy cores. The result was explosions that the swarm had never encountered before. Meanwhile, on the troop transport Incheon's Wrath, Colonel Yeon-ji was preparing for something unprecedented. The Galactic Council had never attempted to board swarm vessels. They were too dangerous, too alien, too unpredictable. Humans had different ideas about acceptable risk. "Marines," she announced over the ship's communication system, "we're going inside one of those things. Intelligence wants samples, and we're going to get them." Sergeant Dae-sung checked his weapon one final time. The rifle was a hybrid of human and alien technology, capable of firing both energy bursts and conventional ammunition. On his back, he carried explosives that could level a city block. "Ma'am," he asked, "what are our rules of engagement inside a swarm ship?" "Simple," Colonel Yoon-ji replied. "If it moves, kill it. If it doesn't move, kill it anyway. If you're not sure, kill it and ask questions later." The Marines loaded into assault pods, small, heavily armored craft designed to punch through enemy hulls and deliver troops directly into hostile territory. It was a tactic that had been considered too dangerous for use against swarm vessels. No one had ever returned from inside a swarm ship alive. The assault pods launched from Incheon's Wrath like bullets fired from a giant gun. They smashed through the hull of a medium-sized swarm vessel and disgorged their cargo of human marines into the nightmare interior. Inside the swarm ship, nothing made sense. The corridors twisted in impossible directions. The walls pulsed with organic life, and the air itself seemed hostile. It was a place designed to drive invaders insane with fear and confusion. The Marines adapted by ignoring everything that didn't need to be shot. "Contact front," called out Corporal Minho as something that might have been a weapon or might have been a living creature emerged from the wall. "Engaging," replied Private Sang-Ho, opening fire with his hybrid rifle. The creature dissolved under concentrated fire, leaving behind a puddle of something that hurt to look at. The Marines moved through the ship like a force of nature, destroying everything they encountered and gathering samples of swarm technology. When they found something too large to carry, they simply blew it up and collected the pieces. Back in space, the battle was reaching a crescendo that surprised everyone involved. The swarm had expected the human fleet to break and retreat, as every other species had done. Instead, the humans were advancing deeper into swarm territory, destroying everything they encountered. Admiral Ji-hoon watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Human losses were minimal, while swarm casualties were massive. The modified weapons were performing better than even the most optimistic projections. "Sir," reported Commander So-young, "we're detecting some kind of communication from the swarm. Vessels. It's unlike anything we've seen before." "Can you translate it?" So-young frowned at her instruments. "It's not language as we understand it. It's more like emotions, raw thoughts. And, sir, I think they're confused." For the first time in its existence, the Void Swarm was encountering something it didn't understand. The swarm was a hive mind that had evolved to consume and adapt. It had faced the weapons and tactics of 12 different species and learned to counter them all. But humans weren't fighting like any species the swarm had encountered. They weren't trying to preserve their ships or minimize casualties. They weren't following predictable tactical doctrine or using weapons with built-in limitations. They were simply trying to kill everything as quickly and efficiently as possible. The swarm tried to adapt to human weapons, but the weapons kept changing. Human engineers were modifying systems in real time, adjusting power levels, and firing patterns faster than the swarm could compensate. The swarm tried to predict human movements, but humans didn't follow any pattern. They attacked from unexpected directions, used tactics that should have been suicidal, and treated their own safety as secondary to mission completion. Most disturbing of all, the swarm began to detect something it had never encountered before. In its meals, the humans weren't afraid. Every other species had fought with fear, desperation, and the hope of survival. Humans fought with cold calculation and the intention of complete victory. They weren't trying to survive the encounter. They were trying to win it. As the battle continued, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in its existence, the Void Swarm began to retreat. Not a tactical withdrawal or strategic reposition, but an actual retreat driven by something the swarm had never experienced: uncertainty. Admiral Ji-hoon watched enemy vessels pulling back toward the edge of the system and felt a grim satisfaction. "All ships, pursue and destroy. Don't let any of them escape." "Sir?" asked Commander So-young, "shouldn't we consolidate our position and call for reinforcements?" "Why?" Ji-hoon replied. "We're winning." The human fleet pressed their attack, chasing, fleeing swarm vessels across the system and destroying them with methodical efficiency. When the Galactic Council fleet finally arrived 3 hours later, they found something that shocked them to their core. The Kepler system had been completely cleared of swarm presence. Every enemy vessel had been destroyed or driven off. The FOSS humans had achieved in hours what alien fleets had been unable to accomplish in months of fighting. More importantly, they had done something no one thought possible. They had made the Void Swarm afraid. The Void Swarm learned quickly. 3 weeks after the disaster at Kepler, they returned with a force 10 times larger than before. The Galactic Council's response was predictable. They prepared for a fighting retreat, planning to trade space. For time while they developed new defensive strategies, Admiral Yeon-Su had different ideas. She stood in the command center of the new human battle station, designated Fortress Seoul, watching intelligence reports pour in from scout ships. The swarm was massing in the Vega system with over 1,000 vessels, including creatures larger than anything previously encountered. "Ma'am," reported her aide, Lieutenant Cho, "Galactic Council Command is requesting our forces fall back to the secondary defense line. They want to establish a fortified position around the Arcturus colonies." Admiral Yeon-Su studied the tactical display showing human and alien fleet positions. The aliens were already pulling back, evacuating civilian populations, and preparing for a siege that could last years. "Send a message to Admiral Thylandra," she ordered. "Tell her we're going to Vega." Lieutenant Cho looked uncertain. "Ma'am, the Council specifically ordered all forces to retreat to defensive positions." "The Council can retreat if they want," Admiral Yeon-Su replied coldly. "We're going to solve this problem permanently." In the research facilities beneath Fortress Seoul, Dr. Wu Jin was putting the finishing touches on humanity's latest contribution to galactic warfare. Project Sundeath had been his idea, a weapon that combined human nuclear technology with energy stolen from captured swarm vessels. "The antimatter containment field is stable," reported his assistant, Dr. Kyung-hee. "But, sir, the power output calculations are disturbing." Dr. Wu Jin nodded grimly. "Each warhead has the explosive power of a small star. The aliens would consider them weapons of mass destruction, aren't they?" "Only if you consider the complete annihilation of enemy forces to be excessive," Wu Jin replied, "which the aliens probably do." Nearby, engineer Cha was working on a different project. Her hunter drones were small, fast, and completely autonomous. Once released, they would seek out swarm vessels and either destroy them or attach themselves to enemy hulls for later detonation. "The beautiful thing about these," she explained to her team, "is that they learn. Each one that gets destroyed sends information back to the others. They adapt faster than the swarm can. The drones were also self-replicating. Given access to raw materials, they could build more of themselves. Cha had designed them with one simple directive: find and kill anything that registered as Void Swarm. General Seok Jin received the alien protests about human weapons development with amusement. The Galactic Council was horrified by reports of what humans were building. They spoke of excessive force and disproportionate response, as if those were bad things. "General," said the Ashanti representative Cormac during their weekly meeting, "we've received disturbing reports about your new weapons. Our analysts believe they violate several galactic conventions on acceptable warfare." "Which conventions?" General Seok Jin asked mildly. "The Convention on Stellar Preservation prohibits weapons capable of destroying planets. The Treaty of Dimensional Stability forbids devices that could damage space-time itself. The Accord on Proportional Response limits weapon yields to necessary levels." General Seok Jin leaned back in his chair. "Are any of those treaties signed by the Void Swarm?" Cormac looked confused. "Well, no, but then they don't apply to this war. the general interrupted. "We're not fighting civilized opponents. We're fighting something that wants to consume the galaxy. Our response will be proportional to that threat." The alien left the meeting deeply disturbed. In his report to the council, he wrote, "Humans do not appear to understand the concept of limits in warfare. They view any restraint as weakness rather than wisdom." Meanwhile, the swarm was making its own preparations. The hive mind had analyzed the defeats at Kepler and other systems, trying to understand how such a primitive species could be so effective. The conclusion was disturbing. Humans fought without the limitations that constrained other species. The swarm's response was to abandon all restraint of its own. The massive force gathering at Vega included experimental bioships that existed, partially outside normal space-time. These creatures could phase in and out of reality, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. The swarm also brought something new: planet killers, massive creatures designed to consume entire worlds in hours rather than days. They had never been deployed before because no opponent had been dangerous enough to warrant them. Admiral Yeon Su studied the intelligence reports with professional interest. How long to consume an Earth-sized planet? Approximately 6 hours. "Ma'am," reported her intelligence officer, "they break down matter at the molecular level and convert it directly into more swarm biomass. Then we'll have to kill them before they get close to any planets," the admiral said simply. Her staff exchanged worried glances. The planet killers were the size of small moons and protected by energy shields that had proven immune to all known weapons. Destroying them would require firepower that didn't exist. "Ma'am," ventured her tactical officer, "perhaps we should consider the Council's suggestion to retreat, and the Council can retreat." Admiral Yeon Su cut him off. "We're going to attack." The human fleet that assembled for the assault on Vega was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 200 ships had become 500, all equipped with weapons that violated several laws of physics. At the center of the formation flew the new dreadnought Eternal Soul, a ship so heavily armed that its own weapons could tear it apart if fired simultaneously. Captain Dae-hyun commanded the stealth destroyer Ghost of Seoul, a ship that had been modified with technology reverse-engineered from captured swarm vessels. It could phase partially out of normal space, making it effectively invisible to most sensors. "Captain," reported his navigation officer, "we're detecting massive gravitational distortions around the target system. The swarm appears to be manipulating space-time itself." Dae-hyun studied the readings with interest. "Then we'll have to adapt." What he didn't tell his crew was that Ghost of Soul had been equipped with humanity's most dangerous experiment, a weapon that could cut through dimensional barriers. If it worked, they could attack the swarm in their own realm. If it failed, they would probably cease to exist. The battle for Vega began when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace and immediately launched every weapon they had. No reconnaissance, no communication attempts, no warnings. Just instantaneous, overwhelming violence. The swarm responded with equal ferocity, deploying the planet killers and experimental bioships in a formation designed to crush any opposition. For the first time since the war began, human forces were outnumbered and outgunned. It didn't matter. Dr. Wu Jin's antimatter warheads detonated among the swarm formation like miniature supernovas. Each explosion wiped out dozens of enemy vessels and damaged hundreds more. The planet killers, supposedly immune to all weapons, began to dissolve under focused antimatter bombardment. Engineer Acha's hunter drones swarmed through the enemy formation like mechanical locusts, seeking out command nodes and critical systems. The swarm tried to adapt to them, but the drones evolved faster than the hive mind could process. Most devastating of all were the new temporal weapons that literally slowed down time around swarm vessels. Enemy ships found themselves moving in slow motion while human forces operated at normal speed, making them sitting targets for concentrated fire. The battle should have lasted hours. Instead, it was over in minutes. When the firing stopped, the Vega system contained the wreckage of over 1,000 swarm vessels. The planet killers had been completely destroyed. The experimental bioships had been torn apart by weapons they couldn't even detect. For the second time in its existence, the Void Swarm had suffered a crushing defeat. But this time, something else happened that shocked both humans and aliens alike. The surviving swarm vessels didn't retreat. They sent a message. It came as a psychic scream that reached every mind in the system, alien and human alike. The message was simple and terrifying. What are you? For the first time in its millennia of existence, the Void Swarm was afraid of something it was trying to consume. The hive mind that had devoured entire civilizations was confronted with a species that fought with such ruthless efficiency that even an entity designed for consumption couldn't understand it. Admiral Yon-Su stood on the Bridge of Eternal Soul, listening to the translation of the swarm's psychic communication. Around her, alien liaison officers looked shell-shocked by what they had witnessed. "Send a response," she ordered her communications officer. "What should we tell them, ma'am?" Admiral Yon-Su smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Tell them we're humans. And tell them this is just the beginning." In the depths of space, the Void Swarm retreated toward their dimensional strongholds. For the first time since their emergence, they were not advancing, but fleeing. The galaxy had produced something they had never encountered, a species that was better at destruction than they were. The war was about to escalate beyond anything anyone had imagined. The first attempt at communication came 3 days after the Battle of Vega. It wasn't words or signals, but pure emotion broadcast across dimensional space. Every psychic species in the galaxy felt it simultaneously, a feeling of confusion, and something that had never existed in the Void Swarm before: uncertainty. Ambassador Yu-Jin stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, her hands trembling slightly as she translated the psychic message. She was one of the few humans with natural telepathic abilities, and the swarm's communication had hit her like a hammer blow to the mind. "The message is difficult to interpret," she explained to the assembled alien representatives. "The swarm doesn't communicate in language as we understand it. But the core meaning is clear. They want to know what we are." Council Leader Mordok of the Zenthari leaned forward, his 4 eyes focused intently on the human ambassador. "They've never attempted communication before. In 3,000 years of galactic history, the Void Swarm has never shown interest in anything except consumption." "They're afraid," Yu-Jin said simply. "For the first time in their existence, they've encountered something they don't understand and can't predict." The chamber erupted in discussion. Several species had been fighting the swarm for centuries without provoking any response except increased aggression. The idea that humans had accomplished in months what others couldn't do in millennia was difficult to accept. Admiral Thilandra raised her hand for silence. "Ambassador Yu-Jin, what was your response to their communication?" "We told them exactly what they asked," Yu-Jin replied. "We're humans, and we're here to end their threat to the galaxy." The reaction among the alien delegates was immediate and negative. Species that had spent generations learning to coexist with the swarm as a fact of life were horrified by humanity's direct approach. You can't simply end the swarm, protested Velthari. They're a force of nature. The best we can hope for is containment and survival. Eugen's expression hardened. That's the difference between us. You hope to survive. We intend to win. Meanwhile, in space, the war was taking an unprecedented turn. For the first time since their arrival in this dimension, the Void Swarm was avoiding direct confrontation. Instead of attacking alien colonies and resource worlds, they were specifically targeting systems where human forces were deployed. Captain, Dae-Hyun received the priority transmission while his stealth ship Ghost of Soul was conducting reconnaissance in the Procyon system. The message came from Galactic Council Command, and it carried an urgency he had never heard in alien communications before. All human forces are to withdraw immediately to Council-protected space, the message stated. The swarm has altered its attack patterns. They are now hunting human ships specifically. Dae-Hyun studied the tactical data attached to the message. It was true, swarm forces were ignoring alien vessels and colonies to focus exclusively on human targets. They were treating humanity as the primary threat rather than just another species to consume. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "we're detecting swarm movement in this system. But they're not heading for the colony. They're moving toward our position." Dae-Hyun smiled grimly. "Then let's see how well they hunt." The Ghost of Soul had been extensively modified with technology reverse-engineered from captured swarm vessels. It could phase between dimensions, becoming effectively invisible to normal sensors. More importantly, it carried weapons designed specifically for hunting swarm command nodes. The pursuing swarm ships were unlike anything previously encountered. They moved with purpose and intelligence, using tactics that suggested individual thinking rather than hive mind control. The swarm was adapting not just their technology, but their entire approach to warfare. But they were still learning to fight humans. Dae-Hyun phased his ship into the dimensional space where swarm creatures naturally existed. It was a realm of twisted physics and impossible geometries, a place that drove most organic minds insane. Human minds, shaped by millions of years of surviving hostile environments, proved surprisingly adaptable. "Contact," reported his weapons officer. 3 swarm hunters bearing 147 Mark 6. They're using some kind of dimensional tracking. "Engage!" Dae-Hyun ordered. The battle that followed took place across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Ghost of Soul's weapons fired through dimensional barriers, striking targets that existed in parallel space. The swarm hunters tried to use their natural advantages, but human technology had turned their own environment against them. When the engagement ended, 3 swarm vessels had been destroyed, and Ghost of Soul had gathered intelligence that would shock the Galactic Council. The swarm wasn't just adapting, they were evolving, and they were doing it specifically to counter human threats. Back on Earth, Dr. Hana was analyzing data from dozens of encounters between human and swarm forces. What she discovered challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the Void. Swarm. They're not just a hive mind, she explained to the Emergency Defense Council. They're a learning organism. Every time they encounter our forces, they adapt not just their tactics, but their fundamental nature. General Park frowned at the holographic displays showing swarm evolution patterns. "Are you saying they're becoming more intelligent?" "I'm saying they're becoming more human," Dr. Hana replied. "They're developing individual initiative, tactical creativity, and strategic thinking. They're learning to fight the way we fight." Admiral Kang Min studied the implications with growing concern. If they're adapting to match human capabilities, then we need to escalate faster than they can adapt, Dr. Hana finished. We need to hit them with something they can't learn to counter. The solution came from an unexpected source. Engineer Mi Young had been working on modifications to human FTL drives, trying to improve speed and efficiency. Instead, she had accidentally created something unprecedented, a ship that could exist in multiple realities simultaneously. The prototype can phase between different dimensional states, she explained to the assembled military leaders. In one state, it exists in normal space. In another, it exists in the swarm's dimensional realm. But here's the interesting part. It can fire weapons from one dimension into another. Commander So Young, now promoted to captain of the experimental vessel, studied the technical specifications with interest. How many dimensions can it access? Theoretically. All of them, Mi Young replied. The ship becomes effectively impossible to destroy because it doesn't exist completely in any one reality. The first field test of the dimensional ship came during a swarm attack on the mining colony at Wolf 359. The colony was defended by a small council fleet that was quickly overwhelmed by swarm forces using new, adaptive tactics. Captain So Young arrived in the experimental ship Quantum Soul just as the colony's shields were failing. Her vessel appeared on sensors for brief moments before vanishing again, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. All stations, weapons free, she commanded. Target the largest concentration of enemy vessels. The weapons that fired from Quantum Soul came from another dimension entirely. They struck swarm ships that thought they were safely phased out of normal space. The enemy vessels, caught completely off guard, began dying in ways that violated several laws of physics. But the most significant development was the swarm's reaction. For the first time since their emergence, they didn't try to adapt. They simply fled. The psychic scream that followed the retreat reached every telepathic mind in 3 star systems. Ambassador Yu Jin, monitoring swarm communications from the Council flagship, felt the raw emotion hit her like a physical blow. "What did they say?" asked Admiral Thil Andra urgently. Yu Jin looked up from her console, her face pale with shock. "They said impossible. But more than that, they're genuinely afraid now. The swarm has encountered something it cannot understand, cannot predict, and cannot counter. The implications spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. Species that had lived in terror of the Void Swarm for millennia suddenly saw a possibility they had never dared imagine, the complete defeat of their ancient enemy. But with that possibility came a new fear. If humans could terrify something as powerful as the Void Swarm, what did that make humanity? Council sessions became increasingly tense as delegates debated whether humanity was their salvation or a potential threat even greater than the swarm. Some species began preparing contingency plans for what they called the human problem. Admiral Kang Min received reports of these discussions with grim amusement. "They're afraid of us now," he told his staff during their daily briefing. "Good. Fear makes allies honest." Commander Yu Jin, monitoring alien communications, raised a concern. "Sir, some council species are discussing military action against Earth once the swarm is defeated. They view us as a potential threat to galactic stability." "Are we?" the Admiral asked mildly. "Sir? Are we a threat to galactic stability?" Kang Min clarified. "We've developed weapons that can destroy planets, ships that exist in multiple dimensions, and the capability to hunt enemies in their own realm. We've proven that we can defeat forces the galaxy considered invincible. Are we a threat?" The room fell silent as his staff considered the question. Finally, Commander Yu-jin spoke. "We're a threat to anyone who threatens us," she said, "which is exactly what we should be." The war moved beyond the physical universe when Commander Sumin led the first expedition into what the aliens called the Deep Dark, the space between dimensions where the Void Swarm had originated. Her ship, the Reality's Edge, had been modified, with technology that shouldn't exist, allowing it to navigate spaces that had no up, down, or any direction that human minds could properly understand. "Status report," Sumin called out as they transitioned into the interdimensional void. "All systems functioning," reported her navigator, Lieutenant Sung-ho. "But, sir, the readings don't make sense. We're detecting what appears to be entire civilizations that exist only in dimensional space. Through the viewports, they could see structures that defied logic, cities built from crystallized time, fleets of ships that moved through solid matter like it was empty space, and creatures so large they could have swallowed star systems whole. These are the swarm's feeding grounds," Sumin realized. "They've been consuming entire realities, not just our physical universe." The implications were staggering. The Void Swarm wasn't just a threat to the Milky Way. They were a multi-dimensional plague that had been destroying countless realities for eons. And humanity was the first species that had ever followed them home. Dr. Chang-ho stood in his laboratory beneath the Himalayas, surrounded by technology that violated several fundamental laws of physics. His latest creation was a weapon that didn't just kill swarm entities, it prevented them from existing in any dimension. The quantum dissolution matrix works by unraveling the target's probability threads, he explained to his research team. Once fired, the target doesn't just die, it becomes impossible for that specific entity to have ever existed. His assistant, Dr. Su-jin, looked concerned. "Sir, that's essentially removing something from the fabric of reality itself. The philosophical implications alone, the philosophical implications of the swarm consuming every reality in existence are worse," Chang-ho replied grimly. "Sometimes, survival requires abandoning philosophy." The weapon had been tested on captured swarm specimens with terrifying effectiveness. Not only did the creatures die, but reality itself forgot they had ever existed. It was a weapon that attacked the very concept of existence. Meanwhile, engineer Mi Young was working on an even more ambitious project. Her multi-dimensional shipyard existed in 17 different realities simultaneously, allowing her to build vessels using resources and physics from multiple universes. The beauty of this approach, she explained to visiting military officials, is that we can combine the best aspects of different realities. Metals that are impossible in our universe, energy sources that don't exist in normal space, weapons that use the physics of dimensions where destruction is more fundamental. The ships emerging from her interdimensional factories were unlike anything that had ever existed. They could attack from multiple realities at once, defend themselves using the physics of safer dimensions, and travel through spaces that had no connection to normal reality. Captain So-young stood on the bridge of her new command, the Infinity's Hammer, watching as her crew familiarized themselves with controls that operated in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Half of her bridge crew were humans with cybernetic implants that allowed them to process multidimensional data. The other half were AI systems that existed purely as computational patterns spread across multiple realities. "Captain," reported her tactical officer, "we're detecting massive swarm movement in dimensional sectors 7 through 12. They appear to be consolidating their forces for a major assault." "On which reality?" So Young asked. All of them, sir. They're planning to attack every dimension simultaneously. The Galactic Council's emergency session was the largest gathering in their history. Representatives from over 50 species crowded into the council chambers, all united by a growing terror that had nothing to do with the Void Swarm. Ambassador Eugene sat at the human delegation table watching alien politicians debate humanity's fate with detached amusement. The topics of discussion ranged from containing human expansion to preemptive action against Earth, to negotiating surrender terms with the swarm to avoid human domination. The humans have gone too far, declared Councillor Mortek of the Regellian Federation. They're not just fighting the swarm anymore. They're rewriting the fundamental laws of reality. They represent a threat to the natural order of existence itself. The natural order, Eugene interjected calmly, was being consumed by an interdimensional parasite until we intervened. Admiral Thil Andra leaned forward. Ambassador, your species has developed weapons that can erase targets from history itself. You've built ships that exist in multiple realities. You've invaded dimensions that were never meant to be entered. How do we know you'll stop with the swarm? Eugene stood slowly, her movement commanding attention from every delegate in the chamber. You don't, she said simply. You have no guarantee that we'll limit our capabilities to current threats. You have no assurance that we'll follow your laws or respect your treaties once this war is over. You have no way to control or contain us. The chamber fell silent. Several species representatives reached for communication devices, presumably, to contact their military commanders. But, Eugene continued, you also have no choice. The swarm is preparing for a final assault that will destroy not just this galaxy, but every reality connected to it. You can stand with us and survive, or oppose us and face the swarm alone. Choose carefully. She sat down, leaving the council to contemplate an impossible decision. Trust humanity with the power to reshape reality, or face extinction at the hands of the Void Swarm. Deep in interdimensional space, Commander Su-min was discovering just how far the swarm's influence extended. Her scouts had located what appeared to be the swarm's central nexus, a structure that existed in all realities simultaneously and served as the coordination point for their multidimensional assault. Sir, reported her science officer, the Nexus appears to be composed of matter from destroyed realities. It's literally built from the remains of entire universes. Su-min studied the massive structure through her ship's interdimensional sensors. It was larger than most star systems and pulsed with energy drawn from countless dimensions. Around it, swarm forces were gathering in numbers that defied comprehension. How many? She asked. Conservative estimate? Several million large vessels, billions of smaller craft, and what appears to be weaponized pocket dimensions. Sir, they're not just planning to attack our reality, they're planning to collapse it entirely. The final phase of the swarm's strategy was beginning to become clear. They hadn't been randomly consuming worlds and species. They had been gathering resources for an assault that would destroy the barriers between dimensions entirely. The result would be a single, unified reality under complete swarm control. Back on Earth, Admiral Kang Min was coordinating humanity's response from the newly constructed multidimensional command center. The facility existed in 12 different realities simultaneously, allowing him to coordinate forces across multiple universes. Status report, he requested. General Park stepped forward with updates from various fronts. Our interdimensional fleets are in position. Dr. Chang Ho's reality deletion weapons are fully deployed. Engineer Mi Young's multi-dimensional shipyards are operating at maximum capacity. What about the Council species? Mixed reactions, General Park replied diplomatically. Some are offering full support. Others are actively preparing to fight us once the swarm is defeated. A few are trying to negotiate separate peace agreements with the swarm. Admiral Kang Min nodded grimly. Expected. What about our secret projects? Project Mirror is ready for deployment. If it works, we'll be able to turn the swarm's own multi-dimensional capabilities against them. The Admiral studied the tactical displays showing the deployment of human forces across 17 different realities. In less than 2 years, humanity had gone from a single-planet species to a multi-dimensional force capable of reshaping reality itself. Send a message to all human forces, he ordered. Operation Endgame begins in 72 hours. We're going to settle this permanently. In the depths of space and the spaces between spaces, both sides prepared for a final confrontation that would determine not just the fate of the galaxy, but the nature of reality itself. The Void Swarm had consumed countless civilizations and destroyed entire universes. They had never encountered anything they couldn't eventually overcome. They were about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met something that refused to be moved. The war was about to escalate beyond the boundaries of existence itself. The final battle began not with a charge or a bombardment, but with something unprecedented in the history of warfare. Humanity committed an act of cosmic theft. Admiral J-1 stood in the command center of the reality engine, a structure that existed in all dimensions simultaneously and drew power from the fundamental forces that held existence together. Around him, displays showed the positions of human forces across 17 different realities, all coordinating for the most audacious military operation ever attempted. Project Mirror is ready for activation, reported Dr. Chang Ho from his station. All dimensional anchors are in position. Reality stabilizers are online. What exactly are we about to do? Asked Commander Yu Jin, who had been transferred from diplomatic duties to serve as the operation's strategic coordinator. Admiral J-1 smiled grimly. We're going to steal the Void Swarm's power source and turn it against them. For months, human scientists had been studying the swarm's ability to exist and operate across multiple dimensions. The key was the Nexus, a massive structure that served as both command center and power source for the entire swarm. It drew energy from the collapse of realities and used that power to fuel the swarm's expansion into new dimensions. Dr. Chang Ho had discovered something remarkable. The Nexus wasn't just a swarm creation. It was a captured and corrupted piece of the fundamental structure that held all realities together. The swarm had stolen it from some previous victim and modified it for their own use. If we can retake the Nexus, Chang Ho explained, we don't just cut off their power supply. We gain control of the mechanisms that regulate dimensional space itself. The plan was simple in concept and impossible in execution. Human forces would assault the Nexus from 17 different dimensions simultaneously, overwhelm its defenses, and seize control of the device that regulated the flow of energy between realities. If it worked, humanity would become the dominant force in multidimensional space. If it failed, the collapse of dimensional barriers would destroy not just the galaxy, but every connected reality. All units report ready, announced Captain So Young from the bridge of Infinity's Hammer. Her ship led a fleet of vessels that existed in multiple dimensions, each one capable of fighting in spaces where physics worked differently. Around the Nexus, the Void Swarm had assembled the largest force in their history. Millions of bioships formed defensive layers that extended across multiple realities. Planet-sized creatures that existed purely as living weapons took positions around key dimensional access points. The swarm had committed everything to defending their source of power. They had no idea that humans weren't planning to destroy the Nexus. They were planning to take it. Phase 1, execute, Admiral J. Wan commanded. The first wave of human attacks struck simultaneously across all 17 dimensions. But instead of targeting the Nexus directly, they hit the swarm's command and control nodes. Dr. Chang Ho's reality deletion weapons erased key swarm vessels from existence, creating gaps in their defensive formations. The swarm responded exactly. As predicted, pulling forces from outer defense rings to reinforce the gaps. It was standard tactical doctrine for any military force. Consolidate around threats and maintain defensive integrity. It was also exactly what the humans wanted them to do. Phase 2, execute, Admiral J. Wan ordered. Engineer Mi Young's interdimensional. Factories hidden in pocket realities throughout swarm space suddenly activated. Thousands of automated ships poured out of dimensions the swarm didn't even know existed, striking at swarm forces from angles that shouldn't have been possible. But these weren't attack ships. They were construction vessels. While the swarm focused on defending against the obvious threats, human engineering teams were building something unprecedented around the Nexus. A multi-dimensional cage designed to isolate the structure from swarm control. Commander Su Min led the most dangerous part of the operation. Her ship, Reality's Edge, phased directly into the Nexus itself, entering the structure that served as the swarm's heart and brain. Inside the Nexus, reality functioned according to rules that had been twisted by millions of years of swarm occupation. Corridors led in directions that didn't exist, gravity worked in reverse, and time flowed backward in some sections. "Sir," reported her navigator, "we're detecting massive biomechanical structures throughout the facility. It appears the swarm has been grafting organic components onto the original machinery." Su Min studied the readings with professional interest. "Can we separate the swarm modifications from the original systems?" "Maybe," replied her chief engineer, "but we'd need to do it while fighting off whatever immune responses the swarm has built into this place." As if summoned by his words, the Nexus began responding to their presence. Walls shifted to block their path, atmosphere turned toxic, and creatures that existed purely as living weapons began materializing around them. The Marines who accompanied Su Min had been specifically chosen for this mission. Each one carried weapons that could function in hostile dimensional space and armor that could protect them from reality distortions. Sergeant Sang Ho led the assault team through corridors that tried to rearrange themselves around them. "Contact front," he called out, as something that might have been a weapon or might have been a living creature emerged from what had been a wall moments before. The firefight that followed took place across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Human weapons fired through dimensional barriers, while swarm defenses struck back from angles that shouldn't have existed. It was combat that violated every rule of physics and logic. But humans had been preparing for exactly this kind of impossible battle. "Charges placed," reported Corporal Min Ho as his team finished planting dimensional explosives around key control nodes. "Ready to sever swarm neural connections to the main systems." "Execute," Su Min ordered. The explosions that followed weren't just physical. They were ontological. Attacks on the very concept of swarm control over the Nexus. One by one, the organic modifications that the swarm had grafted onto the original machinery began to die and fall away. Outside, the battle was reaching its climax. The swarm had realized what humans were actually trying to do and were throwing everything they had at the assault force. The space around the Nexus became a swirling maelstrom of ships, weapons, and dimensional distortions as both sides fought with desperate intensity. Captain So Young watched from Infinity's hammer as swarm planet killers converged on her position. Each one was the size of a small moon and protected by energy fields that had proven immune to conventional weapons. "All weapons, concentrated fire on the lead target," she commanded. Her ship's armaments included weapons that fired from 17 different dimensions simultaneously. The planet killer found itself under attack from angles that existed in different realities, its shields useless against threats that came from spaces where different physics applied. The massive swarm creature died in seconds, its destruction sending shockwaves across multiple dimensions, but the real victory was happening inside the Nexus, where Commander Su Min's team had reached the central control chamber. What they found there defied comprehension. A vast space filled with machinery that existed in all realities simultaneously, tended by creatures that had been the swarm's first victims millions of years ago. "Sir," reported her science officer, "the original operators are still alive. The swarm has been using them as living computers to run the dimensional systems. The beings that had once controlled the Nexus were barely recognizable as having once been sentient. They had been incorporated into the machinery itself, their minds linked directly to the controls that regulated energy flow between dimensions." "Can we free them?" Su Min asked. "Maybe," her engineer replied. "But, sir, they've been connected to these systems for millions of years. Separating them might kill them." Su Min made the decision that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. "Ask them what they want." The communication that followed took place through direct neural interface. Thoughts and emotions passed through dimensional space without the need for words. The ancient beings, the last survivors of a civilization consumed by the swarm eons ago, had a simple request. They wanted revenge. "Phase 3, execute," Admiral J1 commanded from the reality engine. The final phase of Operation Mirror began, as human forces completed their multidimensional cage around the Nexus. But instead of capturing the facility, they did something unprecedented. They gave control of it back to its original operators. The ancient beings, freed from swarm control, but still connected to the machinery, turned the Nexus's power against its captors. Energy that had once fueled swarm expansion across multiple realities suddenly reversed, flowing back toward the dimensional rifts that the swarm used for travel. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the swarm. Their bioships, dependent on energy from the Nexus, began to shut down. Their planet killers, massive creatures that existed partially outside normal space, found themselves trapped in a single dimension and vulnerable to conventional weapons. Most devastating of all, the dimensional rifts that allowed swarm forces to move between realities began collapsing, cutting off entire fleets from their home dimension.